Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Fired Up. This is another solo episode, and so it's just us, which is maybe good because today we're going to talk about something a bit more personal. We're going to talk about how to avoid burnout. If we want to perform in marketing over time, we need to look after ourselves, and that means we need to avoid burning out. So what is burnout? Looked it up on Wikipedia, and here's what it has to say. The World Health Organization describes occupational burnout as a phenomenon resulting from chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed, with symptoms characterized by feelings of energy depletion and exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, feelings of negativity or cynicism, and reduced personal efficacy. So it's really classified as a mismatch between the challenges of work and a person's mental and physical resources to deliver that. But it's worth noting here that the World Health Organization doesn't really recognize it as a medical condition, but I would say you recognize it when you see it, a bit like art. So we know what burnout is. If you've had it, you definitely know. And if you've seen it in others, you can definitely sense it. And I would say it's pretty common in marketing and in agencies where you often have multiple deadlines, and at times your capacity is stretched. There's more work than there is resources. Expectations are always high. Particularly in an agency, there are rarely peaks and troughs of work. Because you're working on multiple different campaigns, you often get peak to peak to peak to peak. Plus, I would say in an agency setting, you tend towards more junior staff who are sort of learning and pushing themselves outside their comfort zone. So they're trying very hard and they're surrounded by others who are doing the same. So you can sort of end up in that sort of boiler room, and that can quickly lead to people burning out. And some agencies are much better at managing that than others. Just as a personal anecdote, I've experienced this twice. Once in my early stage of my career when I was setting up in the US for my last agency, physical burnout, right? Just coming here, working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, nonstop for months, just getting it done. I was young. I had capacity to do the work. I wanted to do the work. I was enjoying doing the work. But physically, you just can't keep doing that, particularly if you're flying back and forward. And then there came a point where I gave myself shingles and was out for weeks, and it was an unpleasant experience. That was physical exhaustion more than chronic burnout, but certainly sort of pushing yourself. And then I would say towards the end of my time at that agency, we'd made 3 acquisitions. Acquisitions are high pressure. They are complex. There's lots of different priorities involved and personalities. And by the end of the 3rd one, they're again exhausted, finding motivation difficult. In a bigger agency, you get a lot of politics as well. So some of that was creeping in. I was finding that a little bit demotivating. No blame on that agency. It happens in lots of big companies. But for me personally, at that time, I was feeling a bit burnt out, and it probably took me 6 months to recharge. And in fact, it was around that time that I decided to set up Firebrand. I needed in that way a complete reset, which isn't necessarily the solution, but something that I think a lot of people do choose to do in order to recover. I want to say that, look, it is important to work hard, and often at early stages of our careers, where you don't have a lot of experience, you've just got to log more hours. You need the flight time, right? You've got to push yourself. You don't know what you're capable of doing until you try and you bump into some limits. So yes, you're going to feel exhausted at some points. You're going to experience self-doubt and I don't know whether I can do this, and I don't know whether I want to do this. And you've got to learn to push yourself through that. But being under pressure, being tired, feeling self-doubt is not necessarily the same as burnout, which is a much more sort of chronic feeling that slowly happens over time. You feel fine, but you're gradually making compromises until eventually you end up in this state where you're demotivated. You haven't been looking after yourself, and people can see it. You can't rev yourself up to perform. So I do want to sort of make that difference between a peak time when you're just in there pushing yourself, because you do need to do that, and a more sort of chronic condition where you're sort of feeling ground down, which would take months to get into. So how do we avoid burnout? And there are really 4 dimensions that I want to talk about today that you need to think about as we are trying to maintain our performance over time. Those are mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. So let's just go through those. Look, mental health. We know far more today than we've ever about mental health. There's a much greater focus on it than there was a decade or 2 decades ago. But effectively, it sort of boils down in a work context, your ability to focus and sustain that focus over time to make sure that you are productive. So what does that mean? Well, it means taking breaks during the day. It means making sure you're getting enough rest. And it means finding areas in your work that you find stimulating. So what are the techniques that you can use to keep yourself engaged mentally in your work? Because there's an element of repetition in everybody's work at every level. Well, obviously meditation, but I think also education, reading about the topic, learning new techniques, discussing the art of what you do with your coworkers so that your assumptions are challenged and so you feel sharp. For example, personally, sometimes I'll just sort of indulge my curiosity and try and learn something new. I'll read about it. Maybe I'll read a book and I'll read some articles about it, or you listen to some podcasts about something and I'll just try it, right? I don't have high expectations that I'm going to be good at it, but I just want to go through the process to see how something works. Now, that's how I like to learn, from experiencing it, having read a bit about it. Others may have a different learning technique, but you might want to educate yourself about AI. You might want to learn about video production. And these are things where you can just, indulge your curiosity. And then having learned that, bring it back into your work and go, oh, I've just learned this. Let's try it. That will excite other people in your team and it'll keep you sort of engaged and motivated. So mental wellness when it comes to work, so you can maintain your focus when you need it to be productive, is obviously a fundamental part of avoiding burnout. And when that spark dies and you just don't feel excited about it anymore, recognize it in yourself and try and find areas that are new to you, because now is probably one of the most exciting times to be working in marketing because of all the new technologies that are changing it. There's plenty to go at if you're feeling like, I'm doing the same old here. Just jump in, find something new. The second is physical. Now, I would say many folks in marketing and in marketing agencies, like they're into endurance sports like running and cycling. And why is that? Because marketing is a long-term game, and because if they do that, they can move themselves into a state of dissociation where they're not thinking about things actively in the moment. They're sort of dissociating, which is great for brainstorming and working through things. And it's great for sort of resting your brain so that when you come back after your run, maybe you've come up with a solution and you've had a chance to just reset. So whatever your preference is, getting enough exercise is really important, and prioritizing it, right? So again, personally, I try and work out 5 times a week for an hour. I do a mix of cardio and strength training. I do some yoga, which is new to me over the last few years. You got to keep flexible as well. But whatever can fit within your schedule. If you've got young kids, when my kids were young, I wasn't able to do that. That's okay. But try and make sure that you are prioritizing some physical time to keep yourself fit, because energy is really important to bring your A game and to fend off burnout. Now, also part of physical is good nutrition. And again, nutrition can be really confusing. I don't profess to be an expert in this, but it's pretty obvious in terms of avoiding too many processed foods, avoiding too much caffeine, which is something that I am not great at, avoiding all those candies that often sit around in offices and people can kind of just start relying on to sort of fuel themselves through the day, or those energy drinks, right? Once you start leaning on those to sort of rev your body, you're starting to sort of burn future energy, and That's just not a great cycle to get into. Not skipping lunch to be at meetings. You really see that once people's schedules get busy, they just don't eat until the end of the day when they're eating too much or they're eating bad things during the day. So there's plenty of places you can go to learn lots about nutrition, but prioritizing eating well is important. And the same here goes for getting a good night's sleep. I think the way that people think about sleep has changed dramatically where, it used to be the less you sleep, the sort of tougher that you were and the better because that was part of the go working culture. I stayed up working on this presentation till 2 a.m. and I'm back in the office at 6. That's just not cool anymore. Prioritizing sleep is fundamental to avoiding burnout. And what you often see here when it comes to physical is that when things get busy, workouts get skipped, the diet really suffers, you don't get as much sleep as you want, and those things start to sort of compound. I'm not as fit as I was, I'm not sleeping well because I'm eating too late, and you sort of get into a negative spiral physically that can start to impact other areas of your life. The third thing is emotional. This is spending time with your family and friends and making it a priority. Some people are really great at this. Others, they've got to bring this back into balance because it's easy to sort of overlook your family and friends during peak work time, but only for a short period. My friends won't mind if I don't come for dinner because I am busy at this time. Or, hey, my spouse can go and do the school run today because we've got this big meeting that's happening. And that can be fine because your family are going to forgive you, your friends are going to forgive you. But the challenge comes when you consistently prioritize work and the individuals start to feel the loss of that support. And then they'll start to sort of feel guilty about missing personal events. Hey, I missed the school play is a classic example, right? That resentment that people might feel starts to be projected onto your work. You also don't have the social support from your friends and family, and that can lead to burnout and regret. And this might be the most elastic of these elements, but if you ignore your family and your friends over even for a short period, it can really start to impact burnout. And it takes a long time to heal those relationships because those are your most important relationships that you have. The fourth area is spiritual. And now you might not immediately think of this if you aren't religious. And I don't mean religiosity here, but a sense that there is a focus on something else meaningful outside of yourself that you believe in. Now, it could be religion, or it could be coaching your son's soccer team, or it could be going to community events to pick up the trash around your local neighborhood. It could even just be walking in the hills and sort of being in nature, something that gives you a sense of connection and purpose and permanence that is outside of yourself so that you have a broader horizon. And if you don't get this, your world can feel quite small, and it means that your work then takes an outsized importance, and you can sort of get wrapped up in the day-to-day of that because, hey, this campaign didn't go well. They didn't like my idea. We lost this important sale. And that just becomes dominant and casts a pall over a lot of the other parts of your life. And what you need is this sort of spiritual connection to kind of look forward and put this into context. Ultimately, it's the balance of these four elements, the mental, the physical, the spiritual, and the emotional, that will help you avoid burnout because none of these are out of kilter and they are all reinforcing each other. And if you lean too far in one or the other and ignore, I go to the gym and I'm getting a lot of sleep, but I'm working hard, I'm ignoring my friends and my family, over time, that's going to definitely have a negative consequence. So you need to think about this lens of thinking about all these four corners of your persona, if you like, will really help you stay focused at work and be able to sustain it. But beyond that, I think burnout can be avoided through good energy management and emotional regulation. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a lot of stuff said about time management, and you can look at the Pomodoro effect or whatever, these ways to improve the use of your time. And that's important. But I like the framing that Tony Schwartz has brought in about energy management. And I'll provide a link in the show notes, but he has a book about managing energy, not time, as a key to high performance. The concept here in a nutshell is that every day you're born with a certain amount of energy, and you can decide where to allocate that energy to your family, to your work, etc. At the certain point, it becomes depleted. And once it's depleted, your willpower goes down and your work capacity goes down. Unlike time, with energy management, you can increase your energy by becoming physically fitter, by sleeping, by eating right, and by managing your energy over time during the day. You have a cadence through the day of peaks and troughs. And if you sort of work in accordance to that, you are going to be more productive. And if you're more productive, you'll be more engaged, and that will avoid burnout. So I like this framing because it makes you a bit more in control. I think this book has a lot of good lessons within it. That's not to say time management's not important, but energy management is a great framing. And the other one is emotional regulation. Some people never learn this, right? But this is the difference between stimulus and response, so that your emotions are not governed by other people's actions or by the circumstances. So something has happened. The presentation that you're in did not go well, or someone did not like your idea, or someone said something rude towards you. You can choose your emotional response to that instead of just sort of your body choosing it. And so you can stay calm and select the right emotion to deal with the circumstance. And you are more in control rather than sort of being buffeted around during your day emotionally by other people who sort of imprint that upon you. There are a lot of books about this kind of topic, but I do think that helping yourself choose the right emotion, you're not a robot, you are a feeling human, but you can control your emotions so you don't get sort of too angry. And I'll often find that, hey, something bad happens, and if you overreact, it's actually the overreaction which comes far, far worse. If you lose your shit over something, then people are going to be talking about that far more than the actual initial mistake. There is an example, and we've all done it. So let's not do that. And it's those kind of things that can then sort of start to grind you down and make you feel like work is tough. And if you avoid that, let's burn out. Overall, like burnout, it's not the weather of having a bad day or a bad week or even a bad month, right? A busy month. I am busy at the moment and I'm pushing it in order to achieve particular goals. You absolutely should be doing that in your career so that you're sort of getting the high points and proving to yourself what you're capable of. You don't leave stuff on the table, but it is more like the season or the climate, if you like, over a longer period of time where you're sort of just starting to sort of perform less and less well and being ground down, and you just can't get yourself motivated. And I would say it's kind of hard to recognize in the moment, and it's easy to sort of slide into it. But having a focus on this balance of, hey, am I physically well? I'm emotionally well, spiritually sort of nourished and mentally engaged. It is a really good way of avoiding it and catching it when it happens. All our lives are not perfect. We have to make compromises here and there or decisions about what things to prioritize. But if you're consciously deprioritizing seeing your friends this Friday because you've got to do something at work, then maybe you can find the time to call them or catch up with them later on. Some people need a full reset. Like I had to change my job entirely, but I don't think everybody needs that full reset, and you can just sort of move past it. And you're not going to have different levels of burnout. I'm just feeling a little bit burnout at the moment. It's quite common, and it's up to you to find that re-engagement. But it's best to avoid it overall, and that takes some constant vigilance, and you're going to need to do it throughout your career. But I hope that these 4 dimensions, once again, mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual, will help you keep balance and avoid burnout in your marketing career. The gang will all be back next time, so join me next week. And I hope this slightly more personal topic was useful. If it was, please let us know, and we look forward to seeing you next week.